Hey, welcome, Niles. Thanks for joining us this evening. We are here for our live wine tasting with Binny's. And so, in addition to Chase and myself, who you guys all know already, we have with us Alicia Barrett, who is a wine educator with Binny's, and Chris, I'm sorry, your last name.
Oh, Speir. I didn't put
Chris
that in.
Speir, who is also a wine educator with Binny's. So while we all know that I love to drink wine, I don't know a whole lot about it. So Chris and Alicia are going to be here tonight educating us a little. So welcome.
Well, thank you for having us. We appreciate
Yeah,
it.
very good to be here. Thank you.
So we are kind of touring Italy with wine tonight. I know some of you had trouble securing the wine, and we apologize for that. It's always hard to know what's going to be popular at a given time. But the 15% discount when you buy all three of the wines is going to be valid until, did we say September 5th, Alicia?
Yes, until through Saturday of next week.
Through Saturday, and it will be good at all Binny's, not just the one in Niles. So if you didn't get a chance to secure all of the wines, please do so within the next week. Or if you enjoyed them so much tonight and you want some more, go back and get another bottle of each.
There you go.
Okay, I'm going to turn this over to you guys.
Very nice. Well, thank you so much again for having us. And I'm sure I speak for Chris in saying that we're thrilled to be here. And anyone that asks us to come and chat about wine, we're always willing to do that. So we're going to take a tour through Italy today, and we're going to work our way kind of from north to south of the country. And it's a country that has so much rich history of winemaking all the way back to the 8th century BC. And then you saw kind of the popularity and the rise of wine production as cities like Genoa and Venice and Florence became in Florence's case, kind of banking capitals and shipping centers in Genoa and Venice's case. So long history. They've kind of figured it out. So we're going to kind of take a tour. I'm going to show you a map here. And while I pull that up, if you don't mind, Chase, if I can share my screen. Chris, why don't you chime in? What do you love about Italian wine?
Oh, there's so much, honestly. First of all, variety. Italy has a mind-boggling array of grapes and styles. I think they've identified legally over 350 varietals easily, and there are hundreds more that just grow around. And occasionally someone finds one just growing in a farrel in a field and decides to propagate it. And lo and behold, you got another wine grape on the map. So, and they're ultra food friendly. These wines, for the most part, are meant to be enjoyed at the table. They have bright, fresh acidity, almost universally, which is great for food, and just an amazing array of flavors. You can find a wine for almost everyone.
Yeah, and there are a lot of people out there in the wine world that do say, I go back and forth with France, but a lot of people do say if they could only drink wine from one country, it would be Italy, because there is so much diversity, and hopefully we can show you a little bit of that today. We'll get back here so you can kind of see all of us, but briefly here on the left, you see obviously this map. This is from Wine Folly. This is not Binny's. Credit to Wine Folly here, but the three circles in red there are what we're going to kind of dive into. The Veneto, and specifically in Soave. We're then going to go to Chianti, Classico in Tuscany, and then all the way down south to Sicily, which I'm personally a huge fan of, and something that we should all be paying more attention to. While this map is up, I will just share, and Chris, chime in with your breadth of historical knowledge here, but do note that historically speaking, a lot of the wine that was made in the southern part of Italy was actually kind of made in bulk, and it was used over the centuries to be shipped up north to kind of add a little more concentration and body to the wines of the north that kind of struggled to ripen back in the day. Now we don't really kind of have that issue, but there was this split, and you see this split in Italy kind of culturally, food-wise, which we're going to get into, and in kind of their development and I would say advancement of wine production. It is the largest producer of wine in the world. Depending on the year, sometimes it loses it to France, but it's up there for sure. So we're going to explore some things, and we picked some mean, Sangiovese you'll know in Tuscany, but the other two, we picked some varietals that maybe you're less familiar with. So I'll stop sharing this map now, and so we can all come back. But that is going to be, if you will, the route for tonight.
Excellent.
Yeah, that's all absolutely true, Alicia. The history of winemaking in Italy is broad and varied and very exciting to this day, maybe more exciting than it's ever been. And just like you can't necessarily think of Italian cuisine as one monolith, it's all about regions. So we're going to explore some of the regions, and you might, if you go to Italian restaurants, you might know at this point, but you wouldn't. You might go to an Italian American restaurant, but now you can go to a Piedmontese restaurant or a restaurant that focuses on the food of Emilia Romagna or Sicily or whatever. And there are wines to go with all of those things. So it's very exciting.
Yeah. And if you are tasting along, we said we're going to do the Soave first, the white wine. So I hope you're consuming as we're talking here. But yeah, I mean, at the end of World War II, like most places, we saw a push for kind of quantity over quality. So to support your statement, Chris, now we really see a quality push. Italians also are consuming less wine than they ever have, about a third of what they consumed about 100 years ago, which is surprising. But yeah, but for us over here in America, that's kind of good news because it means more of the wine is being exported. Typically, like generally speaking, I would say that the export market is also, it's more competitive. It tends to also drive quality standards versus wine that's just kind of kept around for either tourism or table wine locally. So a lot of Americans go abroad and say, oh, well, I just had the best wine and we never get the good stuff over here. And again, generally speaking, that's not true. We do get some of the best wine. So
why are Italians consuming less wine? Do we know that?
This is a broader trend that you'll see across Europe. It's true in France too. Part of it is just the massive amounts they used to consume. So it's a relative thing, but there's a strong pull toward soft drinks and other things in the younger generations that may not be traditional, but our culture is creeping into theirs, and we are the ones who are kind of benefiting because, like Alicia says, we're in a golden age in America for wine. We get the finest wines from every corner of the planet now, and it's fantastic. I mean, you can go into a Binny's and tour the world of wine and get the best of the best, and even great values like we'll see today. We've got 3 wines, and I think this is an amazing point. These are all made by family-owned vineyards and wineries.
Okay, so I have to interrupt you because we are chamber and kind of our motto is shop small, right, Chase?
Yeah.
So the fact that these are family-owned vineyards just makes my heart sing.
Yeah, there's some really big companies in Italy, cooperatives and just very, very large companies that own many, many vineyards under different brands. But these are all family-owned operations, and they're all very quality oriented and amazingly affordable. So I think, yes, we're in a golden age.
Nice. Okay, so can you tell us what this
Alicia's ready to try the first wine.
Well, just to Alicia's point about post-World War II and the drive toward quantity over quality, both of the first 2 wines we're going to drink come from areas that are experiencing the best quality they've ever made in their histories, in my opinion.
Wow.
But we're the victims in the post-war era of that very thing. They're really the poster children for overcropping, trying to produce too much, and making somewhat of insipid wines out of great terroirs and great grape varieties that we're seeing the resurgence of quality here. But yeah, I mean, in the 50s in America, if you were drinking Italian wine, you definitely knew Chianti in the wicker basket, or Soave all the way up through the 70s, very heavily marketed and relatively insipid. But right now we're going to try a Soave from Inama, like I said, a family-owned winery. This is made with a grape that you probably never heard of because, as I said, there's so many of these bizarre grapes that Italy grows, or not bizarre, but just grapes that aren't falling into the Cabernet, Chardonnay, the things that everybody's heard of. So this is something called Garganega. So
You say it so well.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, if you're gonna say an Italian grape variety, you got to kind of do a little sing-song thing. Garganega.
Garganega. Okay.
And it makes beautiful, crisp wines. There's typically a hint of almond in the nose, and sometimes some herbaceousness and stone fruit, and certainly minerality. The soils here are all volcanic, so
Okay.
really a fresh, bright style of wine.
And what's hopefully you all are enjoying this. Jason, I'm going to share my screen again here. I want to show a map while I just kind of share why this particular wine is special and maybe a little bit of a shopping tip. If you find that you enjoy this, let me pull up here. I have a little map that I think will demonstrate the region. There we are. All right. So here we are in the Veneto, in northeast Italy. So remember that first map we saw. And you'll notice the very, very famous Prosecco DOC, which I believe accounts, Chris, am I right in saying it accounts for about half of Italy's exports?
It is a massive, at this point, Prosecco is like a juggernaut. People can't get enough of it.
But in terms, so half, I think, in volume, but in value terms, the other grape varieties of Italy rise up, and people are paying a little bit more for them. But anyway, so I want to show you here in Soave, which you'll see down, that's situated right next to Valpolicella. And the thing with Soave to note, Chris mentioned these volcanic soils of Soave. Those are very much in Soave Classico. So if you have the wine, look at your bottle and you can see that Classico term. Those are the hilly areas, the original territory that was deemed kind of the best for the winemaking there and the best for the vines. And so when you're searching for Soave, I would just encourage you to look for that Classico term. We're just going to see a little bit higher quality here, a little bit more care, and just better sites that allow riper, more concentrated fruit and greater complexity to show through. But as you see, it's not a very big region. The average size of a landholding there is about just under 5 acres. Not very big. There's a lot of small farmers that then a lot of them sell to larger bottlers. But Inama specifically has been around for quite some time, since the 60s, I believe, is when they were established. So anyway, just a little map there for you that I wanted to show.
Yeah, just broadly speaking on that point, you'll see the word Classico as an addendum to a lot of wines. You'll note that the Chianti Classico we're going to drink has that too. And this is a pretty standard practice in Italy to, when, say in that post-war era in particular, Soave kind of grew and they allowed more land to be brought into the appellation. And some of it is just not up to the standards of the rolling volcanic hills and great exposures yet in the Classico region. It's flatter, there's more clay in the soil. So when they, a lot of times the Italians like to differentiate the original best zone by calling it Classico. So that's the case in both Chianti and Soave here. So great tip to look for Classico and Soave in particular. In Chianti,
so that Classico means it's the best zone.
The heart of the classic region, the original region. And this region dates back thousands of years. I mean, we're going back to Roman times that they've been growing wine here. So really, really ancient. Although it wasn't codified into the DOC system until much later, until the 60s. But that's not abnormal. But yeah, this is a fantastic example of very affordable, 100% Garganega.
So I am not a white wine drinker. I don't know that I've ever ordered a glass of white wine out. I am always red. And this is very good. I am enjoying this actually. Which
I'm so glad to hear it. So
Yeah.
not only can this be enjoyed like on a hot summer day like this on its own, but it's a great wine to pair with all kinds of food. So Soave is kind of right in the heart of the Veneto region, and you've got Venice. It's right on the water, so Soave is definitely an important wine in Venice, and it goes with all of the cuttlefish and crab and shrimp and everything they get out of the lagoon there. There's also a large lake on the other side. Verona is on the other side, so you can pair beautiful freshwater fish with it too. So it's really nice. And I sent you guys some recipes, and I actually made one today, and I'm going to eat one right in front of you. And I'm going to tell you. Okay. So this is the. It's going to take me a second to figure that out.
There you go. We got it. Oh my gosh.
Lemon and olive oil bathed shrimp with a crusty bread. And I'm going to taste.
I think I'm going to have to make those this weekend.
Yes.
Okay.
So while Chris is tasting and he can share, as he then has a sip of that wine, we can talk about some food pairing principles, which I have a slide on that we'll leave you with to kind of take home. But I will tout Chris's horn here a little bit in that Chris was a professional chef prior to entering the wine world and has been with Binny's for over a dozen years. So he knows his stuff, but this kind of food pairing element especially is a great gift of his. So if you watching, have questions about this, please kind of just chime in here and I'm sure Chris will answer. But Chris, so how's the interaction? Tell us about kind of the thing going on, because I'm sure it's the key element. What's happening in
I'm going to say, please make this dish. It will literally take you a matter of minutes. It's super simple. And man, is it flavorful. Oh, it's seriously. I'm impressing myself right now. It's really good. And the key to a pairing like this, okay, the white wine and seafood, everybody understands that. But there's a very judicious amount of lemon juice in here. And we might talk about this later, but part of pairing wine is it's very important to make sure that the weight of your food and the weight of your wine are balanced, and also that your wine generally needs to have a little more oomph in certain areas than the food actually does. So in this case, the key is acidity. So we've got bright, fresh lemon juice and rich, luscious extra virgin olive oil. And what you want is the wine to just be slightly more acidic than the food. Otherwise, the wine will start to taste flat and a little flabby. Conversely, when you eat one of these shrimp that has just the right amount of acid, the acid in the wine will pull back a little bit. There'll still be enough there, and it'll make those fruity, like stone fruit flavors pop out. So when I ate that and drank the wine, it was perfect together, and I got a lot more peachy note than the kind of bright minerally citrus note that you taste when you're tasting it alone. So really perfect pairing, honestly. And this is the kind of thing you would find in Venice. So really nice.
And you know what? I'm going to give a shout out to Carol, who said we made and are enjoying the, Chris, how do we pronounce that?
So it's Chianti, but that's almost a throwaway word in that. It doesn't really have much to do with the dish per se, but in Venice, they have a tradition of, like most of Italy, of having aperitivos or drinks after work. And they have a very similar culture to, say, northern Spain's tapas culture, where you can go into bars all over the place and order these, what they call cicchetti, which can be anything like these marinated shrimp or little sandwiches like ham or cheese on bread or deep fried olives. So it would be like saying tapas of shrimp.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. So Carol was we had talked, Alicia and I talked about the fact that the chamber had a trip to Italy planned, and Carol was going to be going on that trip. So I am certain she is enjoying this tonight.
I certainly hope so. Just enjoy them with your feet in the bathtub. It'll be like walking around Venice when it's flooded.
I love it. So, Chris, what else? So, let's say maybe someone isn't going to have shrimp. Let's talk about just some other food pairing options for Soave. I also want to tie in kind of Italian whites in general, and Chris and I will share some of our favorites in terms of grape varieties because, as we mentioned, there are so many indigenous varieties to Italy that you're not going to walk down the Chardonnay aisle in Binny's and find them. I mean, firstly, we sort it by Italy, but second of all, they might not be as recognizable. So we'll break a couple down here. But Chris, talk about some general food pairings first, and maybe share some of your favorite Italian whites.
Sure. So with Soave in particular, any seafood food is great. But if you have a more subtly flavored poultry dish, it can certainly handle that. In this area, they actually eat a lot of horse in this area, although I wouldn't recommend. Yeah, it's one of the few areas of Italy where horse is very popular. But for that, you probably want something red and bolder. But all up and down Italy, you can find white wines, and because we're surrounded by the Mediterranean here, there's almost always seafood is the go-to. But the other thing that you find a lot in the Veneto in particular, and northern Italy in general, is risotto and also polenta. So that kind of rich corn porridge, again topped with seafood or maybe a tomato sauce or any number of things, could be delicious. And risotto is fabulous with a bright, fresh wine like this. So those are some of the things I would recommend. And we can get into some more pairings with the reds when we get to them.
Perfect.
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, as you think about it, guys, just think through kind of intensity that we talked about, right? So if the wine is, as you're tasting the Soave, is a little bit kind of light to medium in intensity. We don't want to overpower that with food. So think about intensity and think about acid. Any dish that, even if you have a pasta-based dish, but it's with a lemon-based kind of sauce, rather than something heavier, like a seafood linguine type thing, that would go really well. But those are kind of the two interests that you have. Yeah, I love the poultry element. The risotto is a great idea. The acid's going to help kind of cut through some of that kind of creaminess that the risotto brings. So all good suggestions.
What type of cheese would you pair it with?
So in the Veneto, probably the most famous cheese of the area is Asiago. But there are a number of cheeses kind of in that broad family. Medium-aged cow's milk cheese. There are some higher mountain areas not too far by. So you could definitely do Soave with a not too sharp Asiago, for sure.
I have Asiago.
Okay. Well, how about that? You're regionally appropriate.
There we go. We're going to better try.
Yeah, Alicia can tell us how that is. If she
get a knife.
But yeah, I love the mention of alpine cheeses. I think that will go really well. And alpine cheeses from anywhere, from Switzerland, from France, from northern Italy, I think would be a really nice one. I also tend to like those cheeses too.
I agree. I lean a lot on regional pairings, but you don't have to stick with that. There are fantastic alpine cheeses across northern Italy and also into Switzerland and France that would be amazing with this wine. So,
okay, very good with the Asiago.
Working? Yeah. All right.
Yeah, very good. Okay, good to know.
So one other thing we wanted to share with you guys today before we move down to Tuscany. Oh, well, sorry. White grape varieties. I'm just going to throw out Vermentino. If you like kind of high acid, kind of crisp whites like we're having here. This was vinified in stainless steel, this wine here, so you're not getting any oak on this wine. If you like that style of Vermentino, another one to try would be Gavi from the Piemonte region. I really, really enjoy.
Indeed. I would point out, so Vermentino creates one of my favorite pairings that I neglected to mention, but it's largely grown on the island of Sardinia, and then in Liguria and the Tuscan coast, which is right across the way from there. And in Liguria, you find Genoa, where pesto alla genovese was invented. All of that herbal basil note and those richer pine nut and olive oil notes. A bright, fresh vermentino from Liguria with a pesto dish is pretty much heaven for me. And I will make one more connection here to this area we're drinking in. So Soave, this one happens to be 100% Garganega, but there are a few other grape varieties allowed. In particular, there's something called Trebbiano di Soave. And you got to be a little careful here because there are so many synonyms and so many grape varieties in Italy. There's a Trebbiano Toscano, there's a Trebbiano di Soave, on and on and on. Well, Trebbiano di Soave is a clone of something they call Verdicchio if you go down the Adriatic coast. It makes an incredibly bright, fresh wine that is perfect with seafood, too. So that's another connection here. It can go into Soave, but there are whole other regions where they call it Verdicchio. And in fact, it has such a great affinity for seafood. They used to sell it in fish-shaped bottles, at least some of the less expensive ones. Kind of kitschy. Some of you, if you remember the 70s, might remember these fish-shaped bottles. Now they have kind of a more stylized version of that isn't so dead on fish, but the wines can be beautiful. So there's another connection there.
We've got a question up there.
Yes, Jennifer, you are right. We're talking about kind of higher acid, fresher white wines that, generally speaking, have not seen oak. That's correct.
That is true. Although in Soave, you can age in oak. And some people do. Usually you're going to see this in a category called Soave Superiore. It really depends on what you want out of your wine because it'll add a lot of richness and some of those vanilla flavors. So if you like Chardonnay, you might search out an oak-aged Soave, but it's a very different animal than what we're drinking here. This is all stainless steel aged and really, really meant to accentuate bright, fresh, crisp mineral and citrus flavors. And you may notice on the bottle, it's only 12% alcohol, which is very, very moderate. And if you're picking wine grapes at 12% potential alcohol, it's really going to accentuate the acidity. And that's what you want here. So,
yeah.
So Chris, while we're still on the white wines, can you talk to us a little bit about, we talked before we were on screen tonight, about taking that out of the refrigerator a little early?
Yeah, absolutely. So the colder your wine is, the more it tends to make the flavors neutral. It subdues a lot of the fruit, especially in the nose and on the palate, and really accentuates acidity. And a lot of times, if you're drinking your white wine out of an ice bucket or straight out of the refrigerator, it's really a bit too cold for the real nuance of the wine to come out. So yeah, it's a great tip to refrigerate your white wine, but take it out of the refrigerator, 20, 30 minutes before you want to drink it. You really want it to come up from, standard home refrigerator is probably 38 to 40 degrees. This is probably best around 45 or so, 45 to 47, in my opinion. So it's really smart to take it out a little early or take it out of the ice bucket and let it sit on the table for a while. Even if you're in a restaurant and you have it in an ice bucket, it doesn't have to stand there because it might tamp down your experience a little bit.
Yeah. Two thoughts on that. If you do like fuller bodied kind of oaked whites, you want to even bump up that temperature even more. So you're kind of looking like 50 to 55 degrees. So take those out even a little bit earlier. Talking about your oak Chardonnays, for example, maybe even some high-end Viogniers. And I also mentioned this to the group, but if someone brings you wine and you have a sip of it and you don't like it and it's white wine, just get it really, really cold. And as Chris mentioned, you won't taste it as much. And you'll still
absolutely.
Like it.
Yeah, I drink a fair amount of white Burgundy, and my favorite way to drink a bolder white Burgundy, like a Bellini Montrachet or something like that, is at cellar temperature. I just go down, if you have a cellar or a wine refrigerator and it's set somewhere around, 53, 55 degrees, right out at that temperature is where I want it. So.
Okay, so I got confused there. White Burgundy. I thought Burgundy was red.
Yes. So we'll leave Italy for just a little bit. So Burgundy is, strongly associated with red, especially since it's a color Burgundy. So everybody thinks it's red, but yes, there's a huge amount of white wine produced in Burgundy. And Burgundy is one of these areas, just like Soave, they don't tell you on the label necessarily what the grape varieties are. But if you're drinking a red Burgundy, you're basically, with a couple exceptions, drinking 100% Pinot Noir. And if you're drinking a white, again, with minor exceptions, you're drinking 100% Chardonnay.
Okay.
So there's that.
Yes, but be prepared to pay for Burgundy, which is one of the, bringing it back to Italy, one of the great things about Italy is the value that you can find in this country. Spain would be another option as well, in terms of old world options, that you can find great wine at this, what are we at, kind of $12 to $15 tonight. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent.
Shall we move on? Shall we move south?
Sounds good.
Yeah. All right. So we will move on to the Chianti Classico. And I learned before you all joined us that Alicia has an affinity for this wine.
Yes. So I shared with Alicia that when I am out at a restaurant and I enjoy a bottle of wine, the way that I record that is I take a picture of the bottle. I'm very visual. So I take a picture of the label and I search for that label next time. So when Alicia told us we were going to be tasting this Querceto, it didn't jog my memory. But when I saw the label, I went, oh, I've had this wine. I like this wine.
It does have a memorable label with the unicorn on it.
Yes. Yeah.
So, Alicia, can I share my screen again and we can dive into the Chianti region a bit here?
Oh, good. Chase has got it. Excellent.
Right. So, like our discussion in Soave, we're having the same issue in Chianti, where Italy was actually kind of an early pioneer of kind of creating geographical boundaries and deciding what grapes grow best where. They did that earlier than most everyone else in the world. But Chianti got really popular. And so what they did was say, well, we're going to just make it a bigger place and to satisfy this demand of the wine. So you'll see here on the map, you'll see that kind of lighter purple area in the middle, Chianti Classico DOCG. This was the original hilly, kind of the best sites for Sangiovese. They then extended it to all of the purple that you see there. Now within there are 7 subzones of Chianti, but Chianti Classico is not a subzone. It is its own region. And as we mentioned with the Soave, generally it's just a few dollars more. We really encourage you to seek out the Chianti Classico DOCG rather than just the Chianti DOCG. In my opinion, I think you'll find that it's worth those few dollars. And just briefly, you'll see an example here of a wine label. And to Chris's point, like Burgundy and like Soave, they don't tell you the grape varietal on the label. But here we have Chianti Classico, and it must be, predominantly Sangiovese. In practice, it's normally about 90-95% Sangiovese. But you'll know that walking away from our time tonight. It won't say that on the label. And then Reserva might appear. This wine is not, but Reserva must be aged for 2 years by law. So that's another kind of quality indication as you seek to kind of decode these labels. Okay, but let's go ahead and we'll dive in here to the Chianti Classico DOCG. Is it as good as you remember, Alicia?
Yes. It is every bit as good as I remember. And full disclosure, I like Sangiovese so much. My youngest dog's name is Sangiovese.
That's nice.
It's possible I was told by one of my children, my oldest, that I cannot name my dog after a type of grape. And I said, oh, well, too late.
Well, if your dog ever has puppies, you should name them after all of the subzones of Chianti.
Ah, there you go.
Yeah. Rafina would be my favorite, I think.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, right? Rafina? I might have missed the boat there.
For those drinking this one tonight, and if you are going to have the next one, if you have them side by side, better. But even if you're going to move on, right now, just take note of the color of the Sangiovese. And you can do this by just tilting the glass in front of you and then looking down through it. And you'll notice that it's a pretty pale intensity of a color. And you'll see just a stark difference to the next wine, where it'll change from this kind of ruby hue that you see. There's even a little bit of like a brick red garnety rim that it fades out to. The next wine we have, the Nero d'Avola from Sicily, is going to be more purple in color and more intense in color. And so, just as you taste more wine and you're learning more, pay attention to that color. This is very characteristic of Sangiovese. Sangiovese is a thin-skinned grape variety, so we don't extract as much of the color pigment. Pinot Noir would be similar in that way, Gamay as well. So just a little kind of, as you taste, start paying attention to the wine's color. Red wine over time will kind of lose color, if you will, whereas white wine actually gets kind of deeper and more intense and gains more color. So it's a little way.
And characteristically, like all things in wine, there's a story behind the name Sangiovese. It actually refers to the blood of Joe. So Sangio, if you know the root, Latin root for blood.
Blood of Joe.
Yes.
You say that like we should know that Sanjo is
Sangre, sanguine, Sanjo.
Okay.
Got it.
All of these things.
Okay.
Yeah. So drink in the power.
There you go. Now, this is an amazing wine. Absolutely.
Yeah, again, I can't say enough about how much quality you're getting here. This is all estate-grown fruit, family-owned winery, owned by the same family for 120 plus years now. And the castle itself, this is Castello di Querceto, dates back literally to the early part, maybe 100 BC.
Wow.
Really, really ancient castle, and it's in the heart of that Classico area, in a town called Greve, where you get these beautiful rolling hills. And again, just like Soave Classico, this is where you have these hillside vineyards that allow the sun to shine down on the vines. If you plant on a hill and you have a southern or eastern or western exposure, every single vine is sun dappled, nothing's hidden. And that's really key here. And, Sangiovese itself is a very brightly acidic grape variety. So again, it's such a great wine for food. And in fact, in Italy, in the area around here in Florence, they make bistecca alla Fiorentina, which is a giant cut of T-bone steak grilled over charcoal and always served with Sangiovese. If you're used to Cabernet with your steak, try Sangiovese sometime, and it will blow your mind. You'll probably never go back to Cab, especially if it's like a dry aged steak where it's really accentuating that rich butteriness and then the tanginess that comes with the aging process. That dovetails beautifully with the bright acidity, the tannic structure, and the bright cherry notes of the wine. It's an unbeatable pairing.
Nice.
You have our mouths watering again.
Now, so
my
I know
job.
you didn't make all of the recipes, but what was the recipe pairing with this one? Refresh my
So
memory.
what I did for this was I made a cannellini bean or a white bean puree,
Yes.
just like you might make a hummus out of chickpeas. But white beans are very, very popular ingredient in Tuscany. So you might find, white beans in soups or in pasta dishes. So it's a white bean puree that you would spread on a little piece of bruschetta or crostini. And then I decided, because Chianti often has a slightly herbaceous note to it and really, really works well with foods that have an herbaceous quality, I added a braised fennel to it that has some red onion in it. And you kind of saute it and get it a little bit brown, kind of caramelize a little bit of the sugar, get that Maillard reaction going, and then cook it down till it's crisp, tender. And then you add just a hint of vinegar to give it that pop. So what makes this pairing work? Chianti is earthy, bright, intense acidity, and you want to pair something like that. Just like the steak, you want fat and protein. So the beans are full of protein. You're putting in extra virgin olive oil. That fat's performing the role the beef fat would. And then you've got the herbaceousness of the fennel, which is another very popular ingredient in this area, and a little pop of acid from the vinegar. And one weird thing that you might not think about, like vinegar or what we would call volatile acidity in wine, is generally an enemy of winemaking in large quantities. But a lot of Tuscan wines and a lot of Italian wines in general have just a tiny bit of volatile acidity in them, that kind of slight vinegar note. And if it's judged properly, you don't perceive it as vinegar, but it really enlivens the acidity of the palate. So that really dovetails with this kind of wine nicely.
Nice.
So I thought about that a little bit.
So I have dipped my sourdough crackers in some homemade hummus, and that is pairing very nicely.
There you go.
So
in this area, you also see a lot of roasted pork, porchetta, or what they call arista, which is just a pork roast with lots of herbs. That would work fabulously. Always a lot of olives, olive oil, rosemary, on and on. All these flavors are great with Chianti or Sangiovese-based wines.
yeah, and that answers the question that came in there, just for kind of some vegetarian suggestions. But you mentioned, Chris, just if you can find a protein, like any bean that, we mentioned the white beans here for this recipe, and then make sure your dish has acid, because Sangiovese is a high acid variety. The proteins will handle the tannins, the acid will match, and then, go ahead and accentuate the lovely herbal qualities. I mean, if you smell this Sangiovese, it smells like Italy. It smells like rosemary. It smells like thyme. It smells like bay leaf. It smells like kind of terracotta, turned soil, alongside this beautiful kind of bright red fruit. That is Sangiovese. So kind of play around with that. And this one isn't. This one is a very kind of easy to drink style. We're not tasting a $70 Brunello here that kind of has a lot of punch. So this would even be fine, Chris, when you say just with like bruschetta or something, even just simple. I think as long as your acid's there, you'll be okay.
Yeah, I'm really glad that a vegetarian chimed in, because I actually considered that when I made these recipes, because it's so easy to fall back on saying, red wine, meat, blah, blah, blah. So 2 out of these 3 recipes are completely vegetarian. And in fact, vegan, I'm going to say, for both of them, other than the shrimp. So I wanted to present things that are very typically Italian in their flavor profiles, but almost anybody can eat, and meat eaters are not going to miss the richness of meat when you're pairing these, like the caponata with the Sicilian wine, or this bean dip with this Chianti. They perform all the same roles, and they have a good balance of protein and fat to them without bringing the animals into the picture at all. So I actually presented these this way for a reason, and I'm glad I did now.
Nice. We have a question on the screen. Can you guys see that?
Yeah. So I'll speak to the tannin bit, and well, I'll just speak to it. And Chris, you chime in with your, especially the chef knowledge on the tannin side. But no, they're two very different things. So earthy, we're describing kind of the aromatic sensation, what we smell, what we taste, all right, in terms of aromas and flavors. Now, typically in your tongue, your taste buds are really kind of tasting things like salt and bitterness and acid and sweetness and sourness, things like that. But the earthiness really comes from the smell. But no, earthy meaning kind of wet leaves, that turn soil I mentioned. Earthy could be kind of this like dried clay. That's earthy. Whereas tannin is a structural element in the wine. So on the skins of the grape, you'll find tannin. You can also find tannin a little bit on the stems if someone includes them in the fermentation process. You can also get tannins in the wine from oak. But predominantly speaking, we're largely thinking skins here, but tannins is the kind of the drying sensation that you feel in your mouth. Tannins as compounds love to bind to kind of fat and protein. And so that's why Chris was saying it's better to have a meal with that fat in your mouth, because without it, the tannins of the wine will bind to your gums and your saliva. So it dries out your mouth and isn't as pleasant. But if you have a piece of red meat, or you have the hummus or the white bean or something that is a protein in your mouth, the tannin will bind to that and not your mouth, and it will make for kind of a more harmonious experience.
Nice. So I'm going to go back to cheeses. What type of cheese would you pair with?
So yet again, Tuscany is dominated by sheep-built cheeses. A lot of them in harder forms. So probably the most famous one is Pecorino Toscano. That would work famously with this. However, right next door is Emilia-Romagna, where the hyper-famous Parmigiano Reggiano and Grana Padano are made. Those kind of hard cheeses are fantastic with Sangiovese-based wines. So I would highly recommend that. Yeah, there you go.
Did you guys coordinate before this?
But you know what? My house is never without Asiago and Parmesan.
You're a woman after my own heart.
Right.
Shall we continue south, ladies and gents?
Sounds great.
Do it.
Nice. I'll share my screen here, if you don't mind. Just give us a little visual again. We're going to head south now to Sicily. And I mentioned when we began how much I love Sicily. And as Chris mentioned, that we're kind of in the golden age for Italian wine. I think Sicily perhaps is in the goldenest stage. I don't know. It's really coming into its own, and it still has a long way to go. So this is from vineyards.com, but just showing you kind of a map here. And there are a couple things to point out as you perhaps seek to explore Sicily. Firstly, that still only 20% of wine made here in Sicily is bottled here. The rest is still sold in bulk. And so that's what I mean. I think kind of the best days are still ahead of it. But you'll notice kind of firstly that crescent, that half moon shape on the right-hand side of your screen, on the eastern side of Sicily, in the kind of magenta color. That's surrounding the volcano of Etna. That is one of my favorite wines. If you were to go into a store, into Binny's, and look for Etna Rosso, that's predominantly Nerello Mascalese. I think it's an excellent, excellent wine. You're really kind of starting at $20 there. So it's not kind of as inexpensive as these, but wonderful grape varietal Nerello Mascalese that Sicily is kind of making itself known for globally. The one we're going to have today is the most planted grape variety in Sicily. And I'll just conclude the map here. If you go all the way to the western side, you see kind of that lighter lime green area. That is where this particular wine is from. But Nero d'Avola is grown kind of throughout throughout the island there. So we are on to the Donnafugata Sedara, which is predominantly Nero d'Avola. Then it has some Cabernet, Merlot, and Syrah. So there's a mix in Sicily of some indigenous varieties, and they're starting to plant more international varieties as well.
This question goes back to the Querceto, I think. And Jennifer's asking, would you describe that wine as both earthy and with tannins?
Yes.
Indeed, yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Excellent. And then Jenny was born at the base of Mount Etna.
Jenny, I'm going to double down on what Alicia said. The Rosso wines that are coming from Mount Etna right now, from Murillo Mascalese, are absolutely gorgeous. Really amazing, elegant, and structured wines at the same time. I think they're great. Oh, I kind of blew it. Hey, I hope Chase still has his wine unopened, because I was going to do a little demonstration.
Let's find out. Chase, we lost him a minute. No, he's got wine in his glass already.
So I was before we came on, I was showing these guys an easy trick for opening these screw caps that are so predominant these days. And one thing people run into is they try to just twist the cap and kind of struggle with it sometimes. I've even had people bring wines back to the store because they couldn't open them at home. Or they tried to put a corkscrew through the top, which was always
okay. I'm trying to wrap my head around taking the wine back to the store and not finding another way into the bottle.
Right? Yes. A tenacious drinker will always get in the bottle. I don't know. I can't relate to it personally, but it happens. But what I always show them, and always blows their mind, they'll say sometimes even, can you just show me how to open this? The easiest thing to do, instead of grabbing up here, is to grab the neck of it and twist. And that neck part is very loose around the bottle, whereas the cap itself is tight. And that will crack that seal very easily. It almost takes no effort at all. And once you do that, you can just unscrew, and it's a piece of cake.
And yeah, don't be, some people come in and they are hesitant to buy wine under screw cap, and they think it might be an indication of quality. And I just wanted, kind of re-educate on that, because while screw cap, when it originated, there were questions around, can this closure kind of age wine well? What is it going to be like in 5 years, in 10 years, whatever? And even just the basic technology wasn't that great. It's advanced so much now. Now, there are different quality levels, so a winery can choose different quality levels, but know that if they're choosing a decent screw cap, they have now kind of designed them to allow the same amount, very small amount, right? But the same amount of oxygen that a cork allows, which kind of allows this wine to continue to live and age and develop and so forth. So they've kind of championed that as that it is age kind of appropriate in terms of a closure. And winemakers were just tired of a lot of their wine being affected by cork taint, by TCA that caused it to go bad. And so, don't judge a wine by its closure. It's advanced a lot.
So, yeah, I would like to reinforce that. The kind of top of the line closures are made by a company called Stelvin, and they have 4 different lines that allow different amounts of oxygen in. You can have a really, really tight seal if you want to keep something ultra fresh. It's a great seal, but you can also mimic that cork. And there are wineries in California, like Plump Jack in particular, very, very famous, very, very expensive wines. On their Plump Jack Reserve, it's $250 a bottle. If you buy a 6-pack, you'll get half under cork and half under screw cap, because they're that confident in the screw cap. But they don't want to shock people too much, so they still give it half corks. But it's not a sign of quality at all anymore. They're great wines, especially if you're shopping New Zealand, Australia, even Germany. A lot of countries have just gone really into the deep end with screw caps, and it's almost hard to find a cork now. But that is not a question of quality in the slightest.
Yeah.
I do have a quick.
This is amazing.
I am not a red wine drinker, as Alicia knows. But I went to Italy like 3 years ago, and I bought a whole bunch of wine from the Chianti region. I stayed there for 3 days. And I always question myself in the way that I store it, because the only thing that I remember them telling me is like putting it on a side and not standing it straight up, and then just kind of keeping it to where it's not going to get too warm. Is that correct, or am I doing it wrong?
That is basically correct. I mean, ideal storage conditions historically would be considered somewhere around 55 degrees, dark, odor, vibration free, and on the side, in particular with a cork. Now, one of the things about a screw cap is you don't have to put your screw cap wines on their side. They can be any orientation you like.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah. So just imagine that if you're trying to age wine perfectly, you're mimicking basically a underground cellar that you would find in Europe, where the temperature and humidity and everything is pretty constant year round. You want to avoid too high, too cold. If it gets too cold, it doesn't evolve that quickly. You know, if you have it at 45 degrees, the wine will age very, very slowly. But yeah, that's basically what you want to do. And depending on where you live, if you live in an apartment, you know, your best option might be, if you don't have a refrigerator, the back corner of a dark closet, you know. So
yeah, I'll just emphasize, don't put it in direct sunlight. As Chris mentioned, darkness, but just to again say, out of light. And don't go out and buy a ton of wine and like put it all in your fridge and you don't even know when you're going to consume it. So firstly, as you open and close your refrigerator door, that light is going on and off. So that's bad for wine. But then secondly as well, though it does seem counterintuitive, it is true in that the cork will dry out if it's at those really low temperatures for an extended period of time. So, you know, keep your white wines kind of under your bed or in your closet or whatever. And then when you know you're going to actually have one, put it in your fridge. And if you need to rapidly chill it, if you have, you know, surprise guests, just put it in an ice bath, like equal parts water, equal parts ice, and just turn it a bunch of times and you'll get there in a few minutes. So everyone can tell just don't put it on your kitchen counter, please.
Tell us a little bit. Or over your oven. Tell us a little bit about the right temperature to drink red at.
Yeah, so similar to what Chris described with whites, there is kind of a variation. Your kind of lighter bodied reds will be kind of at a cooler temperature. The one we're drinking right now, in kind of the low 60s, I think would be just fine. But we're really kind of the fuller reds, you know, in 60 to 64, 60 to 65, I would say. So a lot of people think room temperature, but I'm pretty sure you don't keep your apartment at 64, your house at 64 degrees. So, as Alicia, we were talking, a little bit of refrigeration beforehand might help bring it down slightly. But yeah, so fuller bodied reds, Chris, would you agree, like 60 to 65 degrees or so? And then let's go down another 5 degrees, kind of 55 to 60 for your Pinot Noirs, your Beaujolais, even some like lighter Grenache-based blends and so forth, slightly cooler.
Totally agree. If you're tipping the scales much past 65, you're getting into a territory that is going to make, especially in a big bold wine, the alcohol is going to really pop out in the nose. Things will get a little disjointed if you don't serve at the proper temperature. So yeah, 65 is about the top. And yeah, I enjoy a lot of reds closer to 55 when they're light and bright and fresh to really accentuate those qualities.
So I'm slightly confused by Carol's question. It says if we open a bottle of red wine and don't drink it all, that's where I got confused.
Yeah,
I'm going to power through there. And what is the best way to keep it fresh?
I'm going to demo. So I don't have an open bottle, but it'll still actually, you know what, I'll use this. So firstly, one option, if you want to, Black Friday, Christmas time, whatever, if you only want to have like a glass a night or something, you can invest in a Coravin. All right. So real quick here. So it's going to pump the wine bottle with argon gas. And so it will keep the wine fresh for months, a few months. So even the Inama here even though it's a pretty reasonable bottle, like I'm not going to drink all of this tonight on my own. I've opened, all these other bottles. I've actually replaced the screw cap. They have this technology now. I've replaced the screw cap with another screw cap from Corvin that has like this gel top. And what I do is I put the Corvin on like that, and I just push down. The needle penetrates that screw cap or the natural cork, if you have the corked bottle. And then you just turn it on its side, and out comes the wine. Okay, so that's the expensive option.
Yeah, so just so you understand, as the liquid is pushed out, the Corvin, there's a little canister pushing argon gas, which is inert, so it doesn't react with the wine like oxygen does. So your biggest enemy is oxidizing your wine. So if you can keep oxygen away in any way, that's what you need to do. So we're going to go over a few ways to do it, but that one actually pumps in an inert gas while it's pumping the wine out.
So I don't have a best friend, Anna, that gave me one of those. and I'm not going to finish that white wine tonight. I just put it back in the fridge. How long is that going to be good for?
So if you just put the cork back in it and put it back in your fridge, I would consume it within 3 days.
Oh, I can do that.
I mean, you can consume it beyond that, but it's really going to start to change beyond that. But the cheap version, to maybe extend that to 4 days. White wine does keep better than red. So red wines I try to consume within kind of 2 days. But is this little just vacuum seal system. You can get it. We sell it at Binny's, but it's probably $10 or so. And it's just this rubber top. You put it in the top of the bottle, and then you pump it. It just brings out the oxygen in the bottle. That will at least get that.
And so, Alicia, how long is that going to keep the bottle of red that Carol didn't finish?
So I would say I would still drink it within 3 days on the red. White's kind of four-ish. Yeah.
Okay.
It's kind of
and I would say even with the vacuum, even if the wine is red, combine that with putting it in the refrigerator and just bringing it up to temperature when you want to drink it. As we know, chemical reactions occur more quickly at warmer temperatures. So oxidation will be slowed down significantly just by putting it in the refrigerator. And then you combine that with removing the oxygen from the bottle, and it will extend the life. That's kind of my go-to is the vacuum in, like Alicia just showed.
I got to get one of those then. Okay.
Right.
Okay. So should we talk about the Nero d'Avola?
Yes, please.
If you, we were talking about kind of how earthy, unsavory, and the herbal notes of Sangiovese and the herbaceous notes too. But Nero d'Avola is totally different, and I hope that you can kind of pick that up. In terms of, firstly, we've left kind of this like red fruit camp, and we've gone into blue and black fruits. We also left some savory notes, and we went into more, I get even some floral like violet. I also get some like licorice spice as well.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a completely different beast. And it just, again, shows kind of the depth of all the different grape varieties we can find.
Yeah, I totally agree with those notes. I'm definitely getting a floral violet top note. That licorice is definitely right there. And lots of plummy, rich black fruit. This wine's aged all in stainless steel or concrete, I think. I don't know. But not in a vessel that imparts any flavor like an oak barrel. And so it keeps it kind of fresh and bright and on the fruit-driven side. I think it's really nice, personally. This winery is pretty cool. They're again family owned and very Sicily centric. All their labels and everything have everything to do with Sicily in some fashion. This one in particular is named for a character in a book. So.
And I mean, Donnafugata, I'm going to forget the year, but I want to say they've been around for like over 100 years. It's been in the family, right?
Yeah, so the family's been growing grapes for 100 plus years, and the winery really is a little more recent, but they're really quality minded, and they actually have several wineries. So this one's grown, like you said, up in that um, northwestern part of Sicily, but they have a winery in Vittoria down in the south, and they even have a winery out on one of the tiny little islands that's off the coast of Sicily, where they make a really unbelievable and highly specialized style of dessert wine called Ben Rie, which I would highly recommend if you have a chance to try that. It's amazing.
Nice.
What do you guys think, Alicia and Chase?
I think this is amazing. Chase?
Again, I'm not a huge fan of red, but it is good. It is good, I have to admit.
So yeah, it's easy to drink because it's got so much of that juicy fruit. It's bright. It's got some tannic structure, but you kind of have to suck on it a little bit to coax it out. You know, it's very smooth.
Those of you tasting along with us, we'd like to know what you think of it.
Indeed.
And depending on which one you prefer of the two, and try as you taste wine, just don't filter it through the lens of like, well, I only like this, and this is dissimilar to that, so I don't like it. Try and just kind of wrap your head, okay, what is this grape showing me? Do I think it's well done? And can I appreciate it, even if you just have a glass of it, But anyway, these two wines side by side, just a little bit of an advisement as you kind of go out and order wine, or you speak to a wine consultant at Binny's or wherever. If you preferred the Sangiovese, you want to communicate that you like that kind of more earthy, savory red wine. Okay. Whereas if you like the Nero d'Avola better, as Chris said, it's much more fruit forward. And so you want to share that I want kind of that fuller, more fruit forward style of wine.
So you contrast that fruit forward with earthiness.
Yes.
Okay. Indeed. Yeah. We have Binny's has really well trained wine staff. Yes. But you got to enter the store with the idea of a little bit of a give and take conversation in mind. So if you have any little reference point that you can give one of our consultants, they're going to guide you to something that you're probably going to like. All it takes is a little hint, like I like earthy and savory, or I like rich and fruity, or I love a bunch of oak. It's really simple. We can get you in the right wine, no problem.
Yeah, and the most helpful thing too is sharing specific wines, even if you don't know the producer, but sharing. I really love the Chianti Classico. I really love the Nero d'Avola, because then it's really not even open to interpretation. They'll be able to know kind of what that wine's about and guide you in that way.
Oops, what did Judy says? I didn't buy the Sangiovese because earthy and tannins are not for me. I'm a fruit lover and really like this. Good to know.
There you go. You're already on the right trail there.
She already knows what she likes, right? I have very rarely met a red I didn't like. So,
Chris, what was your food pairing for this wine?
So the food pairing for this one is a very, very Sicilian dish. It's almost a signature dish of the island. It's called caponata, and again, it's all vegetarian. It's basically, if you've ever had ratatouille, it's like the Sicilian version of ratatouille. One thing that's a little bit different about it is they give it a little what they call agrodolce flavor profile. So there's a hint of sweet and sour. And the reason it works here, in my recipe, I use just a little dab of honey and some vinegar again. And the reason it works is because you have so much fruit in this kind of wine and bright acidity. With that sweetness, again, you can't have a wine that's too dry or lacking in fruit when you have any sweetness. Otherwise, the wine's going to taste even drier and very, very austere. It'll strip all the fruit flavors away. But this kind of wine has just enough fruitiness to get away with a hint of sweetness in the dish, and it's really very small compared to the quantity of vegetables that are in here. And then again, that little lift from the acidity. And I'm going to share one of the weirdest pairing tips you'll probably ever hear. I've never heard anyone talk about it in my life, but on that same kind of path, the root of this recipe is eggplant. And in my recipe, you do not peel the eggplant, you just dice it up. And one thing that eggplant has that grapes have, and this may sound crazy, but if you look at that purple skin on the eggplant, it's full of what's known as anthocyanins, or color components, including tannin, just like you find in the wine. So if you eat the skin of the eggplant, you're actually experiencing that tannin too. And what that will do for you, just like tart against tart or sweet against sweet, a little bit of tannin in your food, which rarely crops up because there are only a handful of things that have tannin that you might eat, as opposed to what you drink. It will kind of smooth out the tannin in the wine. So that is like kind of next level pairing, but it's real. And it's a really great dish. I love caponata because, again, you can serve it just as an appetizer in a bowl or on a little toast round, or in Sicily, you'll often see it as a kind of a side dish with a nice like fillet of tuna or something laid over the top of it. It's gorgeous. And if you add that tuna in, this wine is a tuna wine for sure.
I wrote down when I tasted this earlier, I'm like, seared tuna.
Exactly.
This is it.
Right on.
Yeah.
Totally agree. Also, they do a lot of sardines down there. They do a pasta with sardines in it. If you're into that kind of thing, we don't eat a lot of sardines here, but they have a lot of fresh sardines, not preserved. So if you're in Spain, Portugal, Italy, anywhere along the Mediterranean, you're going to find sardines grilled or incorporated into dishes. So pasta with sarde is a classic there. This wine would be great with that.
Yeah. So real quick, just on the sardine thing, for the first time, I actually seek out a high quality tin of sardines, not just the one for like $2. But if you seek out a higher quality one, take some nice like sourdough or whatever bread, toast it, rub some garlic on it, a garlic clove, you know, and maybe even a little butter if you want. And then you put those sardines on it, some olive oil and an heirloom tomato and salt and pepper, and you'll just be in heaven for days. It's so good and so simple. If you like sardines, I would encourage it.
Let me just point out there is a whole subculture in the Mediterranean based around what are known as conservas. And these are canned seafoods. It can be anything from sardines to mussels, whatever, anything you can imagine that can go into a can. And they are absolutely revered. I've been to bars in Spain where literally Michelin-starred restaurants opening a can of preserved seafood and presenting it in the can so you know exactly what you're eating.
Wow.
They take this kind of stuff very seriously. You can get the tuna belly, the ventresca that's in a jar or in a can. It's unlike any canned tuna you've ever eaten in the States. Truly amazing and a weird subculture, and people revere this stuff, and it's super expensive. So canned seafood is not just a $2 can of tuna. I'll tell you that.
There we go. Okay, so since I'm all about the cheese, what cheese am I having with this? I'm sure.
So again, if we're looking locally, Sicily is mostly about sheep's milk cheese. So there are a number of Sicilian sheep milk cheeses that will work with this. But I think any medium to long aged harder cheese would work really nicely. It'll make the fruit flavors really pop in this wine. One thing we haven't really touched on is the way that acidity and salt work together. So if you imagine like a margarita where you rim the glass with salt and then it's all about that intense limey drink and how that just marries together so nicely. Salty cheeses with high acid wines are fantastic. So, pecorinos with high salt levels really pop with fruity, high acid wines.
Okay, good to know. Do we have any other questions from anybody watching with us?
I do have one last slide, if we have time, just on your takeaways for food and wine pairing principles. And, you know, you can just grab if you want, you can grab a photo of it or whatever, and maybe Chris can expand on some that we haven't touched on yet. But these are just kind of your guidelines as you think about it. And, you know, don't be intimidated. You know, just try it. And the worst case, if you have a bad pairing, you know, just try adding maybe a little bit more salt to your dish and see if that helps the wine. But at least you'll know kind of moving forward. But again, here are the guidelines. We talked about the wine being more acidic than the food. And the same applies to the wine being sweeter than the food. And this is a common mistake. If you've been to a wedding and you have sparkling wine with your cake, I don't know if you may recall that it probably didn't taste very good, or, you know, maybe you don't remember, but the wine really should be sweeter than the food. So think about that, especially with your dessert pairings. And Chris was talking about that with the fruit forward nature of this Nero d'Avola almost kind of communicates a sweetness to the food, where he was able to get away with a little bit of sweetness in this dish that he recommended. We talked about the intensity, but Chris, do you want to share from your kind of cuisine chef days about number 4 especially, and then we can wrap with number 5?
Oh yeah, so this is one of my favorite tricks in wine, is a sweet wine with spicy foods. It's truly remarkable. If you like any Southeast Asian cuisines or some of the spicier Chinese cuisines, Szechuan, Thai, or say Vietnamese, a lot of times the dishes will have bright acidity from lime or lime leaves or lemongrass. They'll have a sweet component. They'll have a pungent component. And then there's the chili pepper spice. And one of the finest things in the world you can do is to go out and buy a sweet wine and pair it with that kind of cuisine. Or, you know, in southern Italy, chili peppers are also very popular. So, you know, you see a lot of crushed red pepper in dishes down there. And the hotter the food gets, spice-wise, the more sweetness you want in your wine. And it is truly amazing. It's so good together. I love that trick. And one of the great things about sweet wines, and what makes this work particularly well, is that wines that have too much alcohol in them, the fieriness of the pepper will fight with the alcohol and it'll accentuate that heat. But if you're looking at, I mean, we're going outside of Italy here right now, but you could think about like a Moscato d'Asti if you want to stay in Italy, but like a German Riesling. All of these wines, there's a trade-off between sugar content and alcohol level. So you can either choose to ferment that sugar away and have a dry wine and high alcohol, or you can arrest the fermentation and leave residual sugar behind and have low alcohol. So that's another key component to a pairing like this, is if you have a wine that's 6, 7, 8, 9% alcohol, which is very, very low as far as standard wine levels go, you'll have no problem with that alcohol fighting with the peppers, and the sweetness will mellow out the chili spice, and it's magical. So next time you get Thai or something, get a sweet wine and be amazed.
Yeah, and even if you don't typically like sweet wines, there are a lot of people like, oh, I don't want something sweet. I don't want something sweet. Please give this a try, because it's so different in terms of the mouthfeel and what you pick up. You'll love how well those things marry together. You don't need something super sweet, but just go and ask a wine consultant to give you something like an off-dry Riesling that has just a little bit of residual sugar, and you'll find that when you have it with something spicy, it just calms your palate down so well, and you don't perceive kind of that sugariness that sometimes we think all, you know, wines with RS will have.
So yeah. I make a really spicy jambalaya. So before I make that next time, I should go into Binny's and ask them for something a little sweeter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
tell them the dish so they know, not to give you something like really sweet. Just say you want something with a slight bit of residual sugar. They might take you and get you a Chenin Blanc from Vouvray with a little residual sugar. You could do an After Riesling, as Chris said, from Germany. There are a few options.
Okay, excellent.
Absolutely.
And we talked about the tannin and the meat and kind of that whole interaction, but yet another just kind of reminder there of the tannin and protein relationship. So hopefully these little tips are helpful. I'll stop sharing now.
There we go. All right, and I'm just going to put Judy's comment up here if I can find it. I think I've had way too many glasses of wine to be functioning. And I'm going to echo Judy's comments. Chris and Alicia, thank you so much. This was not only tasty, but educational. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. You're so very welcome. It was really fun, I thought.
Excellent. So we look forward to learning more from you in the future soon.
Yes,
great.
And as mentioned, if you weren't able to grab the wines today, we're so sorry about that. But we'll keep on the discount for you through Saturday at all locations. So we're bringing more stuff into Niles, but feel free to call ahead and go to another location if you need to.
Great.
I don't want to make a crass plug at this point, but if you actually really enjoyed this, Alicia and I both participate in the Binny's podcast. It's called Barrel to Bottle. If you listen to podcasts, we have long discussions about wine, cocktails, beer. Once a week they come out.
Chase, can you put that name up there for us?
And we also do, Binny's does a lot of virtual tastings open to the public on a weekly basis. So tune in. They're really educational and fun.
So the chamber might be doing an in-person tasting. Well,
someday.
Yeah, exactly. Someday. So if we do that, maybe we can get you guys to be there with us to talk us through some wines. The name of that podcast again was Barrels to Bottles?
Barrel to Bottle, the Binny's podcast. Yeah.
Barrel to Bottles, the Binny podcast. Okay.
Yeah, you can find it on any podcasting platform. There's a new episode every week, and we run the gambit: hard liquor, beer, wine. It just depends.
Fantastic.
On the week.
Excellent. Well, thank you both. And I think we'll sign off.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye, guys.
Good night. Enjoy the rest of the wine.